What do you do when you pray? You bow your head, you close your eyes, you open your hands, and you wait. Maybe you'll be heard, maybe you won't. There's a surrender in prayer, an acceptance that says, I've done what I can, and the rest is up to you. The person who prays accepts that something greater than themselves exists. They submit to the idea that a higher will matters more than their own. Prayer is fundamentally about relinquishing control, trusting that whatever comes is part of a greater design. But not everyone wanted to surrender. In every corner of human history, there were people who refused to pray. Those who, instead of begging God, tried to command. Those who, instead of saying please to invisible forces, said, "You will do this." Rather than asking the sky whether rain would fall, they tried to force the sky to deliver. Rather than leaving disease to divine will, they tried to bend the invisible in their favor. Rather than leaving love to fate, they tried to bind hearts with invisible chains. Rather than leaving rival success to natural flow, they placed invisible obstacles in their paths. This is the story of magic, the human will challenging the cosmos itself. And magic isn't a stage trick. It's not sleight of hand or Hollywood special effects. Magic was practiced seriously for thousands of years, in temples, in secret chambers of palaces, in the middle of deserts, at the edge of the sea, by kings and priests, by ordinary villagers, by wise women at society's edges. It had written texts carefully preserved. It had rules, specific materials, precise timings, exact formulas. It had knowledge transmitted from master to apprentice under oaths of secrecy. And it had an appeal people return to again and again because the feeling of control is a powerful human need. Tonight we'll pursue this question. What is the difference between prayer and magic? In one, you beg and supplicate. In the other, you compel and command. In one, you leave the outcome to God. In the other, you try to determine it yourself. In one, you hope. In the other, you try to control. And this difference has shaped civilization itself, creating dividing lines between legitimate religion and forbidden practice, between acceptable spirituality and dangerous heresy. In the 14th century in North Africa, Ibn Khaldun forever changed the writing of history. In his Muqaddimah, an introduction to world history that became more famous than the history itself, he analyzed how societies rise and collapse. He laid the foundations of sociology centuries before Europeans. But he also investigated what people believed. When he came to magic, rather than dismissing it, he tried to understand it, to categorize it, explain its mechanisms, fit it into his understanding of human capacities. Ibn Khaldun defined magic as the power of the human soul to directly affect the material world without intermediary tools, without divine intervention or permission, through direct action of will upon matter. What distinguished this from religion? When a saint or prophet does something extraordinary, the power passes through them, but its source is God. The person is like a channel. Water flows through a pipe, but water doesn't belong to the pipe. The magician is different. The magician draws power from their own soul or forms alliances with spiritual entities, beings that might be good or evil, negotiating with them through secret names and binding formulas. This made magic suspicious from a religious standpoint. The problem was never whether magic worked. Ibn Khaldun states clearly, magic is real. But the question is, what does a person become by practicing it? What happens to their soul, their morality, their relationship with God? Ibn Khaldun distinguished between sorcery and talismanic magic. Sorcery is when a person intervenes directly through soul power. Talismanic magic draws on celestial bodies, stars, planets, moons, using their energies to affect earthly events. Amulets, protective charms, formulas written according to astrological calculations, all attempts to channel celestial forces to Earth. Was magic always forbidden? No. Before Moses, before Abrahamic prophets, magic was openly practiced. In Babylon, Egypt, among the Chaldeans, priests were simultaneously sorcerers. The prohibition came later, with revealed religions that drew sharp lines between permitted and forbidden. The libraries of Nineveh were one of the ancient world's greatest treasure troves. The Assyrian king Ashurbanipal collected cuneiform tablets from every corner of the known world, from Babylon, Nippur, Sippar, and Assur. Among them, historians found the most systematic magical literature to survive from antiquity. Two series were notable, Maqlû and Shurpu, both Akkadian words related to fire, but with different purposes. Maqlû meant burning. At the center was fire, but what burned was a representation of the enemy connected through magical correspondence. If a person believed they had been cursed, they would resort to Maqlû as counter-magic. First, make a figurine of the enemy. Beeswax was preferred, its easy melting symbolically obvious. Clay could dissolve in water. Bronze could be heated. Each material had its specific powers. The choice was never random. Throughout a long night, figurines were destroyed while incantations were recited. As wax melted, the enemy's power melted. As clay dissolved, the curse dissolved. Physical action shaped metaphysical reality. This is sympathetic magic. Like affects like. The part stands for the whole. Destroy a representation, destroy them. Bind a representation, bind them. Shurpu meant purification by burning. Its goal was not to curse, but to escape from curse. According to Mesopotamian belief, misfortune often resulted from sin, perhaps committed unknowingly, in childhood, or through family contamination. In Shurpu ritual, priest and patient worked together. An onion was peeled. As this onion is peeled, may my sin be peeled away. Knots were untied. As this knot is loosened, may the curse upon me be loosened. Physical action activated metaphysical release. What surprised researchers was how organized these rituals were. Compiled by temple scribes, preserved in royal archives, copied across generations by trained priests. Alternative formulations for different circumstances required materials with detailed specifications, documented with bureaucratic precision. Magic was treated like a technical discipline, like medicine, like law. In the Nile Valley, magic was not a sin, it was nothing to hide, because magic, in Egyptian belief, was one of the fundamental building blocks of the universe, as real as gravity, as natural as the Nile's annual flooding. The Egyptians called this force Heka. Heka was not just a concept, it was also a god, one of the ancient in the Egyptian pantheon. The coffin texts define Heka as a power existing even before the creator god. Creation hadn't begun, but Heka was already there. Magic existed before the world itself. E.A. Wallace Budge documented that Egyptian texts constantly spoke of words of power, Hekau. These weren't ordinary words, they moved the universe. Even gods used them. Ra spoke these words navigating the underworld, conquering the chaos serpent Apophis. Isis used them to revive Osiris, and humans with proper training could access these words. In Egypt, there was no sharp boundary between religion and magic. A priest was simultaneously a magician. The same priest who prayed to Amun-Ra also prepared protective talismans and performed healing spells. These roles complemented each other, different applications of the same knowledge. One striking aspect was the importance of language and writing. The hieroglyphic system was considered inherently magical, called Medwu Necher, divine words. To write a name granted that entity reality. To erase a name weakened it. That's why pharaohs would have names erased from rivals' monuments. Damnatio memoriae was a magical act of destruction. That's why in tomb paintings, names beside figures were carefully preserved. Without a name, the dead soul couldn't find its way through the afterlife. The word magic itself reveals historical connections. English magic, French magie, German Magie. Where do these originate? The answer lies in the Persian Empire. When Greeks and Romans described someone devoted to secret arts, they used magos, from Old Persian magu, the name of a specific priestly class, the Magi. For the Mediterranean world, Persia represented the mysterious East, possessing secret knowledge transmitted from master to apprentice. The Magi were representatives of this Eastern wisdom. Herodotus identifies the Magi as one of the 6 tribes of the Medes in northwestern Iran. They specialized in religious rituals, dream interpretation, and maintaining the sacred fire, symbol of Ahura Mazda, never to be extinguished. No Persian sacrifice was valid without a magus speaking proper hymns. No king would make important decisions without consulting Magi's interpretation of omens. What distinguished the Magi from ordinary priests in other cults was their claim to secret knowledge that others lacked. Every temple had its priests, every cult had its officials and functionaries. But the Magi claimed to know something special, something beyond common understanding. They interpreted prophecies and signs. They saw omens that others couldn't perceive. They saw what couldn't be seen by ordinary perception. They tracked the movements of stars, understood the order in the sky, decoded the language of the cosmos as it unfolded in celestial patterns. They knew what dreams meant, both the dreams of kings and the dreams of ordinary people, and could advise accordingly. They claimed to understand forces that ordinary people couldn't perceive, or at least they claimed this expertise, whether truly possessed or not.
When this word passed into Greek as magia and then into Latin as magia, it carried all of these associations along with it. Secret knowledge closed to ordinary people, exotic foreign origin from mysterious lands, the claim to mastery over unseen forces, the ability to interpret dreams and extract meaning from visions, the capacity to see the future through hermetic arts. The English word magic descends directly from this lineage. The root of the word magic is the name of a priestly class from ancient Persia. The historical irony here is important and instructive. The original Magi probably weren't people who did magic in the modern sense of the term. They weren't waving wands and casting spells like Hollywood movie wizards. These were religious officials, ritual specialists, perhaps priests connected to Zoroastrian or pre-Zoroastrian Iranian traditions. Their actual function was to maintain the correct ritual forms, to keep the sacred fire burning day and night without ever letting it go out, to perform hymns flawlessly with correct pronunciation, to be advisors to the king on auspicious timing. But because they came from a foreign culture and dealt with mysteries that Greeks and Romans didn't fully understand, they became identified in the Western mind with the entire category of esoteric power and secret knowledge. This tells us something important about how cultures perceive magic. Magic is always partly about the other. When we do it, it's religion. When they do it, it's magic. We pray, they cast spells. We expect miracles through divine grace. They force results through magical compulsion. We worship gods we know and trust. They call upon foreign powers from alien traditions. Perspective matters enormously in this distinction. The line isn't fixed, but rather shifts depending on who's drawing it. In ancient Athens, in Corinth, in Delos, in Sicily, in all the large and small cities of the Greek world throughout the Mediterranean, archaeologists over the centuries have discovered thousands of thin lead tablets. They found them at the bottom of wells. They found them beside anonymous graves. They unearthed them in the foundations of old buildings during excavations. They noticed them by stepping on them near abandoned temples. Most were rolled up like scrolls, resembling letters, but no one would ever open these letters to read them in the normal way. Some were folded, some had been pierced with bronze nails, once, twice, sometimes repeatedly, each nail seemingly a new curse, a new binding, a new act of magical violence. And some had been buried together with figurines, wax figures with arms bound behind their backs, human representations with names inscribed on them, little dolls meant to represent and thereby affect their targets. These were defixiones, curse tablets. The word comes from the Latin defigere, to fix, to nail, to bind in place. And their numbers, over 10,000 examples have been discovered so far, and scholars believe many more remain buried, tell us how frequently ordinary Greeks resorted to this tool for dealing with life's problems. This wasn't a marginal practice confined to society's fringes. It wasn't something only weird people at the edges of society did in secret shame. In cities, people of every class, every profession, every age wrote these tablets. It was widespread. It was accepted as a normal part of life. Everyone knew such a thing existed and that people used it. Lead wasn't chosen randomly for these tablets. Nothing was random in these rituals. Every element carried meaning. Lead was connected to Saturn, according to astrological tradition, the cold, heavy, slow-moving planet, the dark planet associated with limitations and obstacles. Lead represented restriction, binding, confinement, stopping, delaying. Lead doesn't shine like gold and silver. It absorbs light rather than reflecting it. Lead weighs down, slows down whoever carries it. Lead is cold to the touch, resists fire longer than other metals. It's soft and easy to inscribe, convenient for scratching out messages, and it's cheap, available to everyone who wanted to use it. The choice of material was itself already part of the magic. The ritual actually began with the choice of material before any words were written.
Defixiones followed specific patterns that can be recognized across hundreds of examples. First, the target's name was written, sometimes written normally, like a letter written in peace, sometimes written backwards to reverse the order of things for that person, sometimes written with deliberate spelling mistakes to corrupt the name and thereby the person it represented. Writing backwards broke the normal order. Writing incorrectly embodied the corruption being wished upon the target. Then came the binding formula. I bind so-and-so's tongue. May they not be able to speak in court. May their tongue be held, their words scatter and lose coherence. I bind so-and-so's hands. May they not practice their craft. May their fingers be held, their work falter and fail. I bind so-and-so's business. May their customers not come, their sales fall, their enterprise collapse. I bind so-and-so's thoughts. May their mind be clouded, their decisions wrong, their judgment fail. Whatever you wanted to freeze, to stop, to make as cold and heavy as lead itself. A significant portion of these tablets came from legal contexts. In Athens' courts, which relied on citizen juries who had to be persuaded by oratory, defendants would curse their opponents, bind their tongues so they couldn't speak effectively, couldn't persuade the jury, couldn't find their witnesses, couldn't remember their arguments when standing before the assembly. Commercial competition was also present in the archaeological record. Shop owners in the marketplace cursed the business across the street. May their customers not come. May their goods not sell. May they go bankrupt and close their shop. May their fortune turn to ruin. Love magic was abundant too, of course, binding the desired person to yourself, driving away rivals from their attention, dropping someone else from the beloved's sight, making them think of you through nights of sleeplessness, giving them no rest until they came to you. What's striking about the Greek material is how utterly ordinary and mundane it was. These weren't complex rituals performed by elite priests in sacred places. The tablets were often crudely made, the Greek grammar was frequently faulty, the handwriting appeared amateurish and hasty. These were things ordinary people wrote with their own hands in their own homes. It was magic for the masses, a low-technology solution accessible to anyone who wanted it. You didn't need to be wealthy, you didn't need to be educated, you just needed to find a bit of lead, take a sharp tool, write your curse following the general pattern, and secretly bury it where no one would find it.
The tablets were typically buried in places connected with the underworld. Fresh graves where the dead still had power, water sources that led down into the earth, cracks in the ground that opened to regions below, cave entrances that seemed to lead to darker realms. The logic was this: the spirits of the dead, or the chthonic gods below, Hades, Persephone, Hecate, would receive the message and do what was necessary. You were enlisting the underworld as your ally. You were recruiting powerful partners from the invisible world, spirits who could move unseen and accomplish what living hands could not. Now let's move to a different world with a very different relationship between legitimate religion and forbidden practice. In the Hebrew Bible, in the Torah, in the Tanakh, among the sacred objects described, few are as mysterious, as unexplained, and as controversial as the Urim and Thummim. These objects were carried in the high priest's breastplate, positioned right over the heart, inside the sacred vestments, as part of the ritual clothing prescribed by religious law for those who served in the holiest spaces. When the Israelites faced critical decisions, whether to go to war, how to resolve land disputes between tribes, how to identify the guilty in criminal cases, how to determine what divine will actually wanted, the high priest would come before God's presence in the tabernacle and consult these mysterious objects for divine guidance. But what were they exactly? What did they look like? How did they work mechanically? The sacred text never explains in any detail. Nowhere is there a detailed description, no instructions saying, Urim is produced this way, Thummim is used this way. There are only references, only mentions. They used them, they made decisions with them, they received such and such answer, but how it actually worked is never narrated. For subsequent generations, this knowledge seems to be lost entirely, making reconstruction speculative.
Some researchers believe these were a type of lot system, a sacred lottery for determining divine answers, stones or objects that would fall or be drawn to show the divine answer. When one was drawn, it meant yes, the other meant no. Left hand or right hand, go or don't go, war or peace. Some scholars think they were crystals or jewels whose appearance changed under divine influence, or at least was believed to change. Glowing stones that indicated answers through luminescence, crystals that changed color when questions were asked, sacred objects that trembled, moved, dimmed, and brightened according to the question asked of them. Others believe they were purely symbolic, not actual physical objects, but metaphors for priestly discernment. The names themselves are unclear and disputed. Urim might be connected to the Hebrew or, light, meaning lights or illuminations. It might be related to arar, to curse, meaning curses or the cursing ones. Thummim might be connected to tam, perfect, whole, complete, meaning perfections or truths. Even the etymology is an enigma that has occupied scholars for centuries without definitive resolution. What makes this case fascinating from the perspective of studying magic is the ambiguity and the contrast with other cultures. Here we have a technique for obtaining divine information that involves physical objects and specific procedures. In form, it resembled divination practices found everywhere in the ancient world. Hepatoscopy, reading livers of sacrificed animals in Babylon, the procedures of the Delphic oracle in Greece, the reading of bird flights in Rome, fire interpretations in Persia, using physical objects to obtain answers from the invisible world. But this technique was placed right at the center of Israelite religion in the most sacred area of the tabernacle, into the hands of the high priest himself. What was the difference from prohibited magic? Where exactly was the line drawn between legitimate divine consultation and forbidden magical practice? The Hebrew Bible contains many severe prohibitions against magical practice. The famous command in Exodus, "You shall not permit a sorceress to live," shows how seriously the danger was taken in the community's legal framework. The death penalty for magic workers. Consulting mediums was forbidden. Summoning the spirits of the dead was forbidden. Looking to fortune-telling, engaging in prophecy outside official channels, reading the future in stars, all forbidden with heavy sanctions prescribed. Yet the Urim and Thummim were permitted, indeed required. They stood right at the center of legitimate religious practice. Prophets received direct revelation. This was not forbidden, but celebrated.
Dreams could carry divine messages. This was accepted as a normal channel of communication. Lots could be cast to ask God's will. This was legitimate religious practice. Were these magic? No one would say so. On the contrary, these were religion itself, the very heart of legitimate divine communication. The difference appears in the source and authority of the practice, not in its technical nature. Divination performed within the official cult by figures authorized by the community and tradition in the proper way according to established precedent. This was legitimate. The same techniques performed by unauthorized practitioners, outsiders, women working independently, foreigners with their own traditions, were magic and were cursed, were to be eliminated from the community. Control mattered. Authority mattered. Who was doing it? By whose permission? On whose behalf? In what institutional context? These questions mattered more than mere technique. This pattern appears in many religious traditions across the world. The boundary between religion and magic is determined not by the nature of the action itself, but by who controls it and who has authorized it. When Ibn Khaldun, perhaps the most brilliant mind of the 14th century, took up the question of magic, he brought the same systematic, analytical, almost scientific approach that characterized his revolutionary work on history and society. He didn't dismiss magic as ordinary superstition unworthy of serious thought, didn't brush it off as ignorance that educated people should simply laugh at. He tried to understand it on its own terms. He questioned its mechanism. He defined its categories. He built a coherent theory that fit within his broader understanding of human capacities and cosmic realities.
His analysis begins with an ancient concept, the concept of the soul, the nafs. Human souls differ in their capacities, Ibn Khaldun argued in his careful analysis. Not everyone's soul is the same, just as not everyone's body is the same. Most people's souls are entirely bound to their bodies, limited, capable only of ordinary perception and thought. This ordinary soul sees, hears, touches, smells, tastes, thinks, but cannot go beyond these basic functions. It cannot extend beyond the body's 5 senses into the world. But some souls, rare souls, are more powerful. They can affect the external world directly without physical mediation, reaching outside the body to touch matter at a distance, influencing other minds, shaping events far away. They can transcend the body's normal limitations. They can extend themselves to touch matter. They can reach into other minds and implant thoughts. They can influence events through concentrated will. This power of the soul is, according to Ibn Khaldun, the foundation and source of magical practice, its essence and origin. When a powerful soul's practitioner concentrates intensely, when they visualize a desired outcome with their entire being, when they focus all their attention on a single target with unwavering concentration, this intensity, this concentration can produce real effects in the world. The soul extends and touches matter across distance. It influences a person far away. It directs events according to the magician's will. This, for Ibn Khaldun, is not supernatural, but natural, simply a rare ability, a power found in few people. Some people run more powerfully than others, some see better, and some possess spiritual power that most humans lack. He carefully distinguishes this from sleight of hand, what is called sha'baza or sha'bazeh in Arabic, what we call juggling or stage magic in modern terms. The street performer, the man entertaining people in bazaars and markets, can appear to produce fire from nothing. He can seem to create objects from nothing, make them disappear, transform them before the audience's eyes. But these are physical tricks that deceive the eyes, sleight-of-hand games, mechanical illusions relying on misdirection and quick fingers. In reality, nothing metaphysical has happened, only the eye has been fooled. The real magician, however, in Ibn Khaldun's careful analysis, produces actual effects through willpower, through the soul's power, not illusion, but genuine influence upon the world.
Ibn Khaldun also meticulously distinguishes magical practice from the miracles of saints. When a Sufi master, a wali, friend of God, a pious person beloved by God, performs extraordinary actions, healing a patient with a single touch, seeing an event happening miles away, knowing the future before it unfolds, doing unusual things in time and space, the source is different from the magician's power. The saint has purified their soul through long years of discipline and worship, through ascetic practices and constant prayer. They have lifted one by one the 70,000 veils that separate human consciousness from divine reality, according to Sufi teaching. They have disciplined their ego, killed their selfish desires, passed beyond their individual identity. They have reached the state called fana fillah, annihilation in God, losing themselves in the divine ocean. At this point, power flows through the saint, but its source is God, Allah's power acting through a purified channel. The saint makes no claims for themselves. The saint doesn't become arrogant about their powers. The saint cannot compel anything to happen by their own will. The saint is only a perfectly clean channel, like a clear mirror reflecting divine light without distortion.
The magician, by direct contrast, relies on their own soul's power, or on powers recruited from outside, on alliances formed with spirits that might be helpful or harmful to humans, with jinn, with shayateen, demons, with entities whose nature and intentions are not always clear. The magician uses their own power. They trust their own technique. They recruit power from outside, from below, from the darkness rather than the light above. This is why magical practice in Islamic law was severely forbidden, even though it worked, even though it produced real effects. The problem was never whether it worked or not. It probably did work, at least sometimes, at least for some practitioners. The problem was what happened to the person practicing it, what became of the soul, what became of the heart. How far did the person stray from God in pursuing these alternative sources of power? In the 6th century BCE, a man emerged from the island of Samos and changed the ancient world in ways that still echo today. Pythagoras, mathematician who discovered fundamental relationships between numbers, philosopher who taught the transmigration of souls, mystic who founded a secretive community of initiates, founder of a mystery school whose influence extended for centuries. His followers transmitted his teachings over many centuries, expanding them and sometimes attributing to him things he never said. In philosophical traditions extending to Pythagoras, or claiming to extend to him, since much about his actual teaching is uncertain, we find magic positioned within a broader system of secret knowledge. As transmitted to medieval sources, the Pythagorean heritage defined 4 occult sciences: theurgy, astrology, magic, and alchemy. 4 branches of hidden wisdom, 4 paths to power, 4 gates opening onto invisible reality, 4 windows onto the unseen world. Each dealt with a different domain of hidden reality. Each had its own specific techniques, materials, timings, and specialists who had dedicated their lives to mastering their particular art. And each promised a power that ordinary people with ordinary knowledge could not access. Theurgy, literally God work, came from the combination of the Greek theos, God, and ergon, work. In practice, it dealt with divine invocation, the practice of establishing contact with higher beings and receiving power from them, communication with gods, with angels, with the luminous powers above, calling upon them through prescribed rituals, asking for their help through prayers and offerings, channeling their power through prepared vessels, approaching them through gradual purification. This was the highest of the occult arts because it directed the practitioner upward toward the divine source. It overlapped significantly with religion. In fact, some practitioners argued that this wasn't magic at all, but religion in its purest form, direct communion with divine reality. Astrology was the art of reading the sky and interpreting its messages. It mapped the influences of celestial bodies, the sun, moon, planets, and fixed stars, upon earthly affairs and human destinies. It was believed that the movements of stars and planets affected human fate, perhaps even determined it according to iron laws of cosmic influence. Understanding these influences gave the power of foresight, the ability to choose favorable times and avoid dangerous ones. The sky at the moment of birth determined a person's character, tendencies, and destiny written in stellar script. The future positions of planets announced future events to those who could read the language. Kings wouldn't make decisions without astrologers advising on timing. Wars wouldn't begin without consulting the heavens for favorable configurations.
Magic, in its core sense, magia in the narrow technical meaning, was the direct manipulation of spiritual forces for specific effects desired by the practitioner. This was not prayer. In prayer, one requests from God, and God determines the outcome according to divine wisdom. It was not theurgy either. In theurgy, the aim is to ascend, to become enlightened, to draw closer to divine source. Magic wanted concrete results in the world, stopping an enemy from success, winning love from an indifferent person, healing an illness that wouldn't respond to medicine, multiplying wealth beyond normal means. Neither entirely divine nor entirely material, right in the middle space between heavenly and earthly. The technique of transforming invisible forces into visible results. Alchemy sought to understand and transform matter according to hidden principles. The famous goal that everyone remembers was turning base metals, lead, copper, iron, into gold through chemical and spiritual processes, the promise of infinite wealth through transmutation. But true alchemists knew this was only the surface level intended for outsiders. The deeper aim was often spiritual transformation beneath the material metaphor. Turning lead into gold was actually turning the base human soul into the perfected human being, transforming the polluted spirit into the pure spirit ready for higher realms. Matter was metaphor for the soul's journey. The laboratory was simultaneously a temple for spiritual work. The common assumption uniting these four disciplines was this: reality has invisible layers closed to ordinary perception but accessible through special knowledge, discipline, training, and practice. The material world visible to our senses is not the complete picture of existence. Behind it are forces, correspondences, connections, laws, and these can be learned. With the right method, the right teacher, the right sustained effort over years, this invisible world can be accessed and used by those prepared to do the necessary work. Among the four Vedas, the fundamental sacred texts of the Hindu tradition, among the oldest religious writings in human hands dating back over 3,000 years, the Atharvaveda occupies a special and somewhat controversial position that has never been fully resolved. The Rigveda concerns itself with praise hymns directed to divine beings, celebrating cosmic order, glorifying the gods with beautiful poetry. The Samaveda deals with melodies, with sacred songs sung during sacrifice ceremonies, with the sanctity of properly intoned sound. The Yajurveda deals with sacrificial formulas, with ritual procedures, with the technical knowledge used by Brahmin priests in temple for performing complex ceremonies. These three Vedas belong to the formal, priestly realm of elaborate temple practice. They required great temples with expensive infrastructure, complex and costly ceremonies that could take days or weeks, Brahmins who had been educated for long years in proper pronunciation and procedure. They were far from the ordinary person's daily concerns and practical needs. The Atharvaveda is different. The Atharvaveda is practical and worldly. The Atharvaveda is oriented to everyday life and its challenges, and the Atharvaveda openly contains magical formulas for getting things done in this world.
There are mantras for healing illness here. Formulas that reduce fever, that stop bleeding, that neutralize poisons, that heal skin diseases, that relieve pain, practical medical incantations for common ailments. These are medical prescriptions in a sense, but alongside the physical medicine, there is always a mantra. Word and matter work together, verbal and material combined.
There are protective spells against demons and evil spirits that might attack, words that protect the home from malevolent influences, that protect children from supernatural harm, that protect pregnant women from dangerous spirits, that protect herds and crops from invisible destruction. Formulas functioning as shields against invisible threats. There are curses against enemies of various kinds, formulas that bind the rival's tongue so they cannot speak against you, that stop their hand so they cannot act, that break their plans before they mature, that reverse their luck so it favors you, that drain their power and transfer it elsewhere. Battle spells for achieving victory over opponents in conflict. There are love spells for attracting the desired partner, binding the beloved to yourself alone, making them think of you every hour of every day, cooling their feelings toward rivals, holding them tight in invisible bonds. There are spells for success in trade, agriculture, gambling, and warfare, a formula for every concrete need that humans might face. This is practical magic for daily problems, and it has existed within the sacred text structure for thousands of years. No one tried to burn it or destroy it. No one tried to throw it out of the canonical collection, despite its seemingly lower character. The relationship between the Atharvaveda and the other three Vedas has always been complicated and contested. Some orthodox traditions, some strict Brahmin schools, hesitated to grant it full sacred text status equal to the other three. It appeared too worldly to them, too focused on this life's concerns rather than cosmic truth. It seemed too practical, too grubby in its interests. Instead of high philosophy about ultimate reality, instead of cosmic truths about Brahman and Atman, it concerned itself with concrete and banal outcomes, healing a stomachache, winning a lawsuit, attracting a lover. It was connected with low magic, with black magic even in some passages. It sometimes addressed spirits and demons rather than high gods, pleading with or commanding beings of uncertain moral status. It compelled rather than praised, manipulated rather than worshipped. But it survived and continued to be transmitted. It was too useful to give up. People wanted what it offered. What the Atharvaveda demonstrates is this. Even in cultures that developed the most refined philosophical and theological traditions, even in the culture that produced the profound metaphysical thought of the Upanishads, that developed the concepts of karma and samsara and their endless cycles, that formulated the search for moksha, liberation from rebirth, as the highest goal, the human drive toward magical solutions, toward practical magic, toward formulas producing concrete results in this life never disappeared. Philosophy didn't satisfy people all the time or for every need. Abstract thought didn't solve problems all the time when problems were urgent. People still got sick and wanted to recover now. They still had enemies who threatened them today. Their loved ones still went unrequited and they wanted results. Famine still knocked at the door and philosophy couldn't fill empty stomachs. What answer did philosophy give to these pressing, immediate concerns?
When these problems arose with urgency, cosmic abstractions didn't offer much help. But if you knew the right mantra, if you pronounced it correctly with each syllable precise, if you used the proper emphases at the right moments, if you performed the accompanying actions flawlessly according to tradition, if you did it at the proper time facing the right direction, then maybe, the tradition promised, you could change your situation. Technique mattered enormously. Detail mattered in every element. Flawless application mattered above all. If even one syllable was wrong, if the intonation was slightly off, the effect might disappear entirely. In China's mountain monasteries, for over 1,000 years, Taoist priests have been writing mysterious characters on yellow or red paper. Fu, sometimes translated in Western languages as talisman or amulet, are the most common tool of Taoist magic. But these are not ordinary pieces of paper. Each Fu is an official document sent to the invisible bureaucracy, to the gods in heaven, to the spirits beneath the earth, to the administrators of cosmic order. Taoist cosmology depicts the invisible world as an imperial bureaucracy. There are hierarchies in heaven, the Jade Emperor at the top, with thousands of gods, spirits, and officials beneath him. Just as in a military or civil bureaucracy, each entity has defined duties, authority, and scope. And business, healing, cursing, purification, is conducted by submitting the right application to the right office in the right format. Fu is the form of this application. The Taoist priest is like an expert who knows the language of the invisible bureaucracy, who can reach the right offices in the right format. Fu writing requires precise attention to every detail. The ink must be red. Red is the protective and powerful color. The paper must be yellow or red. The writing sequence must follow specific rules. While writing, breath must be held. Specific visualizations must be made in the mind. Sometimes mantras must be murmured. The resulting symbols are not ordinary Chinese characters. They are special, complex figures belonging only to this tradition. The finished Fu is burned and its ashes drunk with water, or hung on the door, or placed under the pillow, or buried. The paper disappears, but the message is believed to have been sent. This system offers an interesting perspective on what magic is. Here, magic is not direct power, it's bureaucratic process. The priest doesn't force, he applies. He doesn't command, he requests. But with the right procedure, the right form, reaching the right office, results come. Just as in worldly bureaucracy, things work when you're in the right department with the right documents. Now let's go to a very different time, the 20th century, and a very different place, the Melanesian Islands. Here, perhaps the most surprising modern example of magic occurred. During World War II, Pacific Islands gained strategic importance. The American military built airports, warehouses, and hospitals on these small islands. Planes descended from the sky. Canned food, fabric, tools, weapons, cargo filled the islands. For the indigenous peoples, this was a miracle. Things they had never seen rained down from the sky. Metal birds, airplanes came from heaven and left treasures. When the war ended, the soldiers left, the planes stopped, the cargo stopped. And then something strange happened. On some islands, people developed rituals to bring the planes back. They made airplane models from wood and straw. They built control towers from bamboo. They wore wooden headphones. They created fake runways with fires. They imitated the soldiers' marches. They raised American flags. And they waited. This was called cargo cult. And at first glance, it might seem ridiculous. But take a step back and think, what happened here? People tried to summon invisible results by imitating visible behaviors. Soldiers used radios, so let's imitate radios. Planes landed on runways, so let's make runways. If the form is imitated, the content will follow.
This is the modern version of sympathetic magic. In Babylon, melting the wax melted the enemy. In Melanesia, building the runway would summon the plane. Same logic, different time. Cargo cult reminds us why magic is universal. The human mind sees patterns. It establishes cause and effect relationships. And sometimes, especially when facing complex phenomena, it establishes wrong connections. This isn't stupidity, it's intelligence itself. Pattern recognition is the foundation of human cognition. Sometimes we just recognize the wrong patterns. When we look at these various traditions, at Babylon's cuneiform tablets documenting ceremonial magic, at Egypt's hieroglyphic papyri explaining Heka's power, at the mysterious knowledge of the Persian Magi, at Greece's lead curse tablets found in wells and graves, at the Hebrew tradition's Urim and Thummim worn by the high priest, at Islamic civilization's theories of sorcery and spiritual power, at India's Atharvaveda mantras for every occasion, we find striking patterns that transcend specific cultural contexts. Despite vast differences in language, theology, social organization, political structure, and economic system, despite separation by thousands of miles and centuries of time, people unaware of each other, who never met, never communicated, never exchanged ideas across these distances, continually developed similar magical technologies. This cannot be coincidence. It demands explanation. Sympathetic magic appears everywhere. The principle that like affects like, that similarity creates real connection, the belief that destroying an image damages the original it represents, the idea that pronouncing a name gives power over or to the one named, binding what you want to bind physically and also metaphysically, burning what you want destroyed by throwing its representation into fire, untying the knot to release the spiritual bonds that constrict. Actions performed in the visible world find correspondence in the invisible world through mysterious channels of influence. These principles appear in every magical tradition we have examined, despite no possibility of contact between their practitioners. The binding and loosing motif appears everywhere. The idea that magical actions can restrict or release according to the magician's intention. Binding the tongue so they cannot speak against you. Binding the hand so they cannot grasp what you want. Binding the foot so they cannot walk toward their goal. Binding thought so they cannot plan effectively. Or the opposite direction, loosing from a curse that holds you, loosing from illness that confines you, loosing from bad fate that follows you, loosing from attachments that bind you, loosing from an enemy's attack that weakens you. Words of power appear everywhere. The belief that specific sounds, expressions, and formulas carry functionality far beyond their literal everyday meanings, a power that ordinary speech cannot match no matter how eloquently expressed. The right word, spoken with the right pronunciation at the right time, changes the world itself. It brings rain from cloudless skies. It heals disease that medicine cannot touch. It turns hearts toward the speaker. It brings enemies to confusion and defeat. Material correspondences appear everywhere. The linkage between specific materials, lead, wax, iron, copper, gold, silver, plants, animal organs, human hair and nails, and specific powers and effects according to hidden laws of sympathy. No random selection in magical practice. Every material serves a purpose connected to its nature and associations. Lead is cold and heavy, so it binds and slows. Wax melts easily, so it destroys through melting. Gold is incorruptible, so it purifies and protects.
Expert practitioners appear everywhere. Whether a respected temple priest in official robes or a witch figure pushed to society's edges and feared, the specialist figure who knows what ordinary people don't know, who can reach the invisible world that remains closed to common perception, appears in every culture we have studied. Why did all these cultures, independently, develop these concepts with such striking similarity? Why did people everywhere in the world, in every age, under every condition, turn to magic when facing their problems? One answer is psychological, rooted in fundamental features of human cognition and emotion. Humans have never been comfortable with uncertainty. It violates our need for predictive control over our environment. Uncertainty drives people toward madness if prolonged. Waiting without knowing whether rain will fall for your crops, sitting up until dawn hoping your child will survive an illness without knowing the outcome, agonizing while waiting to learn whether the person you love returns your feelings, trying to sleep without knowing what your enemy is planning against you. These are situations difficult to endure with equanimity. Uncertainty becomes unbearable past a certain threshold. Magic offers the illusion of control, or perhaps sometimes the reality of it. Who can say for certain? At least you're doing something active rather than passive. At least you're not waiting helplessly for fate to decide. At least you've taken action, struggled against fate rather than surrendering to it without resistance. Another answer is sociological, rooted in how societies organize power and prestige. Magic creates specialists holding valuable knowledge that others need.
Every power system benefits those who control its techniques and can claim exclusive access. Priests, healers, and sages who can perform effective magic, or are believed capable of performing it, have status, income, and influence in their communities. They have a special place in society. They are consulted, feared, respected. Magic becomes a profession. Magic becomes a source of power. Magic creates social hierarchy as effectively as any other form of specialized expertise. A third answer is perhaps that there's something real in all of this that we don't fully understand. Perhaps the human mind, intensely focused on an outcome, has subtle effects on probabilities, nudging reality in preferred directions through mechanisms we cannot yet explain. Perhaps ritual creates psychological states, confidence, calm, determination, clear focus that genuinely improve outcomes through well-understood placebo mechanisms. Perhaps placebo effects work in fields far beyond medicine, in warfare, in trade, in love. Perhaps belief produces its own reality to some degree that escapes our current scientific frameworks. We cannot dismiss thousands of years of human belief and practice as ordinary stupidity, ignorance, or backwardness unworthy of serious attention. Too many intelligent people working within functional societies that achieved remarkable civilizational accomplishments spent too much effort on these practices. They allocated too many resources to magical specialists. They transmitted this knowledge across generations with care and precision. They must have gotten something from these practices. Concrete results sometimes, psychological benefit frequently, social position reliably, or some combination of all these benefits that justified the continued investment. From Babylon's dark temples where priests chanted over melting wax figures to the banks of the Nile where Heka predated creation itself. From Persian palaces where Magi interpreted dreams for great kings, to Athens' graveyards where common folk buried their lead tablets. From Israel's tabernacle where the high priest consulted Urim and Thummim, to the libraries of medieval Islam where Ibn Khaldun theorized about the soul's capabilities, to India's forest sacred spaces where the Atharvaveda offered a formula for every need. At each stop, we found different versions of the same human fundamental story. People everywhere and in every age tried to control the invisible, to bend unseen forces to their will, to refuse passive acceptance of fate's dictates. Every civilization we examined understood something that the pure materialist modern viewpoint struggles fully to articulate or accept. The visible world doesn't exhaust reality. Beneath or beyond what appears to ordinary perception, there are forces, connections, correspondences, laws that the five senses cannot directly detect. The world isn't just atoms bouncing according to mechanical laws. It's not just physics and chemistry deterministically unfolding. There's something more, perhaps soul. Perhaps subtle energy, perhaps connection across distance, perhaps consciousness itself as a fundamental feature of reality. Call it what you will, give it whatever name fits your conceptual framework. Different cultures named these hidden dimensions differently according to their own languages and traditions. In Babylon, there was the wrath of gods and the affliction of demons affecting human fortune. In Egypt, there was the cosmic power of Heka, woven into the fabric of existence from before creation. In Persia, there was the secret knowledge of the Magi, transmitted through initiatory chains. In Greece, there was the intervention of underworld gods responding to properly deposited requests. In Israel, there was the fine line between what was permitted within official cult and what was forbidden outside it. In the Islamic world, there was the power of the soul and the reality of jinn existing alongside humans invisibly. In India, there was the vibration of mantras interacting with cosmic forces. Different names, different systems, different specific techniques, but the same fundamental belief underlying it all. They developed different techniques to access these hidden dimensions. They burned candles in prescribed ways and melted figurines according to specific formulas. They buried tablets at liminal locations and spoke mantras with precise pronunciation. They prepared talismans using elaborate astrological calculations and looked to stars for guidance. They drew the line between acceptable religion and forbidden magic at different points along the spectrum, sometimes with harsh penalties for transgression. But all agreed on the fundamental premise: there's more than what appears to unaided perception. Not everything is visible to ordinary sight and touch. Our senses don't show us the complete picture of what truly exists. The practitioners of what we call magic were, in one sense, engineers of this invisible realm, technicians working with forces that conventional thinking denied or ignored. Just as an architect uses the rules of gravity and material science to construct buildings that stand against physical forces, the magician tried to understand and use the rules of unseen forces to produce results in the world. They believed they had established rules in their domain as reliable as agricultural or metallurgical rules, procedures tested over generations. Follow procedures correctly and results will follow predictably. Speak the formula correctly and the effect will happen as promised. Prepare the material correctly according to specifications and power will be directed as intended. Set the timing correctly according to celestial patterns and the cosmos will assist your work rather than oppose it. Were they right in these beliefs? A question that modern science has difficulty fully answering with current methods. Many magical claims certainly don't withstand empirical testing when examined by modern research protocols. But the boundary between magic and medicine was never as clear as we might assume. Healers did sometimes heal, even without modern pharmaceuticals or surgical techniques. Curses seemed to work sometimes, at least when the cursed person knew about them and believed in their efficacy. Placebo effects are real and sometimes strikingly powerful, affecting objective physical outcomes in measurable ways. Belief shapes outcomes in documented ways that challenge purely materialist explanations. The relationship between mind and matter remains partly mysterious even in the neuroscience age, even with brain scanners revealing neural correlates, because correlation isn't causation, and consciousness itself defies full materialist reduction.
We can say this with confidence. For thousands of years, humans refused to accept powerlessness in the face of the unknown and uncontrollable. When gods didn't answer prayers through conventional religion, when wishes remained unfulfilled despite fervent devotion, when supplications hung in the air without response despite following all the proper forms, some people tried other approaches that offered more agency. When official religion didn't grant them autonomy over their fate, they sought power in forbidden traditions that promised results. When priests closed the temple door against them, they went to witches who would serve any customer. When the religious establishment excluded them from access, they took refuge in graveyards where other powers might listen. The magician's fundamental act isn't evil, it's refusal. Refusing to surrender to fate as given, refusing merely to stay passive while circumstances work against you, refusing to wait and hope with open hands, then accept whatever comes as God's will, then move on resignedly, choosing not to fall into helplessness when action might be possible. Whether this refusal leads to real power over circumstances or only to a convincing illusion of power, an intoxicating but ultimately empty feeling of agency, cannot be known for certain with our current knowledge. Perhaps it will never be known definitively, but this is certain. Humanity never stopped reaching for it. Civilization after civilization, millennium after millennium, continent after continent, culture after culture, the engineers of the invisible continued their work through every discouragement. And they're still working today,